And some of the other case studies include like a zombie themed FPS game with 10 million downloads. We had around like 50% LTV uplift. And another studio with like 10 million MAU saw a 14% lift in just 2 to 3 weeks.
Guys, for you guys who don't work in Admon, that's crazy numbers.
It's 4 a.m. and we're rolling the dice. Mate drops, knowledge made of gold and ice. Felix with ads making those coins rise. Jack up designs, worlds chasing the sky. We're the 2.5 gamers, the midnight crew. Talking UA adverts and game design too. Matej, Felix, Shaka, bringing the insight. We're rocking those vibes till the early daylight. Matej, UA, master eyes on the prize. Tracking data through the cyberspace skies. Felix stacks dollars like a wizard in disguise. Jacob's crafted realms lift us to the highs. 2.5 gamers talking smack. Slow hockey stick, got your back. Ads are beautiful, they light the way. Click it fast, don't delay.
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, everybody. My name is Matej Lančarič.
I'm Felix Broberg.
And I'm Jakub Rim.
And
we are your
hosts. Ooh, okay, cool.
Jakub was a bit...
He didn't get the memo.
Yeah.
Today we have a very special episode because we have a very special guest as well. Roy, welcome to the show. Could you give us and the audience a quick introduction about yourself and Airbridge?
Great. Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. I'm Roy Nam, CEO and founder of Airflux and Airbridge. So it's really good to be here in 2.5 Gamers with Matej, Felix, and Jakub. Really good to be here because I'm your avid listener all the time. So I normally just represent myself as a CEO of Airbridge, one of the 7 certified MMPs in the world, trusted by like 500 different mobile companies. But today, I'm here to represent Airflux, our new Admon optimization AI, which we're going to talk about. So nice to meet you all.
Nice. Thank you very much for coming because we also had a very good and not only entertaining but pretty good knowledge sharing in Seoul where you had us in face to face. So thank you very much for that. And also I hope we started a tradition. So every year, hopefully in January we can host together again an interesting and awesome event in Seoul. So yes, very cool. Okay, so you mentioned Airflux. Please, can you kind of give us a brief introduction of Airflux as well, and what kind of sparked the idea to create something like this?
Yeah, for sure. So Airflux, how should I do this? Yeah, so Airflux is an AI-powered ad monetization platform, built specifically for mobile casual games. So what it does is really simple. It dynamically optimizes the timing and frequency of the interstitial ads and also the payout of the rewarded video ads based on individual player behavior, device type, country, OS, and all kinds of these attributes and behaviors. So significantly, we help you increase the LTV of your casual games. So it's kind of the AI ad monetization engine, which kind of helps you increase the LTV. That's what we do.
Okay.
And maybe, you asked me also about how did this first start? Yeah, so kind of long story short, it started kind of a year ago during a project with a major casual game that had over 10 million monthly active users. So when we were reviewing their monetization setup, we realized something surprising. Their interstitial ad timing was nearly identical for all the users, regardless of country or their behavior. So they're just literally having the same kind of interstitial ad first timing to every user universally. So that's when Noel, our data science team lead, had an idea that what if we delay the first interstitial ad based on geography? So we ran the test. We got an approval by them. We ran the test and saw dramatic results. So one of the examples is European users, for example, showed strong resistance to early interstitials, and simply delaying the first ad improved both retention and monetization. So that was kind of the aha moment. We asked ourselves, what if we could, do it at scale? What if we could automate this kind of optimization, not just by region, but at the individual level. And that's like how we came up with this idea of Airflux.
So basically, Felix is out of his job.
Yeah. No, out of my job. No. This is actually, if we think back to when we had the CEO of Burning Game, Tolia, on the podcast, right? This is what he hinted at without saying was one of the biggest unlocks that they did. But he said it was very difficult to do it in-house. So essentially what Roy is talking about is exactly being able to do that, but outsourcing it, if I'm understanding it correctly.
Yeah, I mean, we intend not to be part of this mediation play. Like we still believe that raising eCPM is critical to gaming success, but we're trying to actually solve the same problem from the different angle, I would say.
Okay. I'm just trying to unpack. Felix, can you unpack this for us as well as non-ad monetization people, just to understand why do we?
So basically, there's a couple of different factors, right, that decide on eCPM, right? And one of the biggest factors that's particularly important for casual games is the amount of ads that you've previously shown to a user. And basically, how that works is on a curve. So if you're showing, for example, 12 rewarded ads per day to users, essentially the first ad is going to be getting a much, much higher eCPM than the 12th ad. But basically, this can also be timed. So sophisticated admon players actually design games and basically space out the rewarded ads during the day. Because let's say if you have a 3 or 4 hour gap between the third and fourth ad that you watch, they're going to get a much higher eCPM with that spacing. So what Roy and Airflux, I'm assuming they're tapping into, is when to show the ads to optimize retention, eCPM, and all these factors. And I'm a bit curious, actually, Roy, like, how do you guys actually personalize the ad delivery? Like, what do you actually look at?
Well, yeah, at the high level, I'll try to simplify things.
For us, yeah, thank you.
It's actually ML and AI, so sometimes it's difficult for me to describe the true algo, what's behind the scene, but I'll try my best. So like it's simple. Like for likely payers, we minimize ad disruption because they're eventually going to purchase, right? We don't want to disturb them, so we minimize the ad disruption. For non-payers, we maximize ad exposure just enough to avoid churn. So we're going to maximize, but right before the moment that they'll decide to churn. So we try to actually do this by putting in all kinds of these user attributes and behaviors and the eCPM and all these kind of data that we can collect from the game and really put them all together in our machine learning algorithm and personalize things and do the A/B testing and kind of do it again and again. So here's a real example. Like in Europe, as I just told you, users are really sensitive to early interstitials. So if you show them too soon, you risk losing them. But when we delay that first ad just slightly, we didn't just avoid churn, we actually got them to watch the second and the third ad later in their playtime. So it's about using prediction and personalization to create a smoother player experience that results in higher long-term value.
Cool.
Yeah, it's the usual kind of first-time payer prevention where you don't want to deter the payers by slapping ads on them. We talk about this like numerous times, that what you're looking at as like a lot of hybrid casual games that we covered, that you're looking pretty much for a cutoff. Like cutoff for like in day 7, I don't know, 70% of the payers materialize, so you start slapping interstitial ad from day 7. But if somebody can do it on a personalized level for every single user for you, it's much more efficient than just going global, because we always do it global before we had any AI tools to do these things. Like I know I've been setting these cutoffs myself before.
Are you saying AI is actually helping gaming industry?
Finally.
That's a new thing.
Right, like I'm assuming you look at the eCPM data. So I'm assuming like if you have the cache ads to basically get that data, and then you look at the delivery, right? But what other data points do you actually look at when deciding the ad delivery?
So Airflux is really 4 things roll into one. So we have this prediction, we have segmentation, we have automated A/B testing, and a little bit of reinforcement learning as well. So in terms of variables, we train our models using a wide range of user data, like country, definitely, OS, like in-game behaviors like, stage clears or achieve level, ABC, or eCPM, and campaign signals as well in the future. So based on this, we estimate purchase probability or ad tolerance per each user. That would be the first step. And then we microsegment users into many different segments, but only those segments that matter to the LTV. And then we run automated A/B testing to optimize interstitial timing, frequency, and rewarded video payout. And then because it's the A/B testing, we need to have a control group and a treatment group. And we measure the incremental LTV uplift between this control group and the treatment group and apply reinforcement learning to assess the result and maybe iterate it once again. So let's just say that this kind of timing didn't actually lead to that much incremental LTV. Then the reinforcement learning, will actually simulate it with another variable and they'll actually move it to another variable. So the more diverse your user base across many different countries, the more powerful this becomes, and personalization, gains, get bigger as user behaviors gets more varied. If the users are homogeneous to each other, all of these attributes and user behaviors might not lead to personalization. But if they're all acting differently, then we believe the gain becomes large.
Yeah, let's say I have a game with over 5 million DAUs, and I come to you and say, hey, so I want to work with you guys. I want to launch Airflux. So what are like step-by-step kind of processes? Yeah.
Yeah, so because we're ML and AI solution, we need to collect the data first in order to run the model. So the first step would be installing the SDK. Right now, we're using Airbridge SDK because it's the easiest way because the SDK is proven and stable. So we ask the customers to send some of the key events like ad impressions, stage starts and clears or level achievement and all that. And also wrap your ad triggers with an if clause. So if you're a developer, you would understand that, you just put an if
I have
clause.
no idea what you just said.
Yeah.
If clause.
If clause, like logically,
Yeah.
if clause like comes with the true input, then you proceed with the next step. If it comes with false value, you don't need to proceed with the next step. So it's kind of a logical diversion point. So if our API returns true, you should show the ad. If it's false, you should skip it. And if there's no response, just to be safe, just default to showing. So actually, it's kind of simple. Install SDK, send events, our model will run, and then just in front of every ad trigger, you put this if clause, true, show the ad, false, don't show the ad. So it's kind of like all about SDK and API integration.
So now I got it. It's if clause. Okay, I thought it's F clause, like something else.
Is there a limit then, I'm assuming, on how big of apps that you need in terms of user base for this to actually be effective? Like if I have 20,000 DAU, this might not be as effective.
You mean
if
like
I have
the learning
5 million.
data set?
Yeah.
Got it. So I think like it's more of a revenue, the volume of the actual revenue, the definite volume, not really a user account itself, because we actually act on an incremental value, which means that let's just say if we increase your LTV by 10% or 20%, the actual size, the baseline itself should be large enough to, really cherish that increment portion. So we typically think that those clients who we believe should be a good fit to this kind of solution are the ones that are having at least 30,000 USD blended revenue every month. So if they're having like more than 30,000 USD revenue, then I think they're just good to go with this kind of solution.
This is ad revenue, right?
Blended
total revenue. Blended.
Yeah, he mentioned blended. Okay, in that case, is there a good split between an IIP revenue and ads revenue, or it doesn't matter that much?
So right now, we believe definitely IAA-driven titles are better fit because essentially what we do is we leverage the IAA portion of the game. So we are preparing to launch the IAP recommendation feature in the longer term, but right now we're laser focused on interstitial and reworded videos. So if they're coming with the 30K revenue in total every month, I believe the split at least have to be like 50-50 or 70 IA or 30 like IP. So even if they're hybrid monetization games, I would say at least like half of the revenue should be coming from ad itself. But actually, the reason why we would say that 30K USC total revenue, not just the ad revenue, is because we found out that there's a strong correlation between the interstitials, rewarded videos, and in-app purchases. So for example, if you're a hybrid casual game having both sides of the world, like IAP and IA, and let's just say that if the users were interfered and disturbed by the early interstitials, if you show them like 5 times of this interstitials, even before they even consider buying your removed ads products or some of your welcome packages, they might just turn or drop off in the middle. So we found out that just by leveraging these interstitial ad timing and the frequency and the reward that is given to the users by rewarded videos, these IAPs are also influenced by them by a lot. So that is the reason why we just believe that any games with like hybrid monetization or purely IAA monetized games can be our customers.
It sounds like you're talking like quite some data here. Like, do you have any like real world success cases that you can walk us through?
Yeah, so one of the most interesting cases comes from a game with over 5 million MAU. This game is a casual game, kind of a simulation game, and they actually have 5 million MAU across many different countries, like hundreds of them. So when we launched Airflops with them, our algorithm started optimizing interstitial ad frequency per each country. And here's what we saw. So like for the US and Japan, the algorithm was optimized to show lower ad exposure in stage 1, a bump in stages 2 to 3, then tapering, so dwindles over time. So for Korea, which was kind of reversed because the algorithm was optimized to show more ads early and fewer later. And this kind of led to us optimizing the LTV overall for all of these countries. And we eventually saw like within 4 weeks, we saw more than 20% growth in total LTV. Interesting thing is that this kind of result wasn't hard coded. It was learned through the data and it really worked. And maybe the reason why it could have happened is because US and Japanese players showed improved early stage retention because we actually didn't show them much ads in their first stage. Whilst like Korean gamers, it didn't really matter to them by data. So we just showed them anyway, and it just like helped us gain more revenue. So since stage 1 is where first impressions and monetization start, and maybe that was the reason why there was a huge impact. Just by adjusting some of these frequency and the timing of these ads throughout stage 1 to 8. Yeah, that's how it happened. And some of the other case studies include like a zombie themed FPS game with 10 million downloads. We had around like 50% LTV uplift. And another studio with like 10 million MAU saw a 14% lift in just 2 to 3 weeks.
Guys, for you guys who don't work in Admon, that's crazy numbers.
Of course. I mean,
Right, like in aggregate, did you show more, like a higher IMPDAU or a lower IMPDAU overall globally as a result of the algorithms?
For some users, yes, impressions count definitely rose by a lot. For some other users who we actually determine as high probability users for purchase, definitely we must have shown them lesser ads because we know that we shouldn't disturb them until they make purchase.
How did you do the timing? Like, was that more impactful, or like how did you go about with that?
I believe that it's a little bit hard for me to answer because I'm not a data science guy, but I heard from our team that timing matters a little bit more than the frequency, because when we think of the timing, especially for the interstitial ads, itself is a very big disturbance to the user's gameplay. And if they're actually just going through the stage 1, now they're getting barely immersed in the gameplay, and then you see the ads, you're disturbed, and maybe you just like decide to drop off. So I think the timing of the first interstitial ad is not only just proven by data, but also intuitively very important factor for your success. And like as I told you, like European users generally show the highest resistance to the early interstitial ads, and then comes North American gamers, and then comes APAC gamers. APAC gamers are very tolerant with this kind of early interstitial ads, and it's really proven by the data.
European gamers are just annoying.
So I guess here is the $1 million or probably even $10 million question. So linking this with UA campaigns, I guess since you're using the Airbridge SDK, I guess the plan is to link this with UA data at some point, right? Because that's where you can really make some magic happen, right?
Yeah, I totally agree. And like I listened to some of the 2NF Gamers podcasts, and the last episode about this topic with Heavy Games, I definitely listened to it. And I believe it's a great idea. And actually there's some realized cases for that as well. So for the UA campaign data, or sometimes we call it attribution data, I understand how critical this is, especially in terms of the campaign type, like a blended ROAS versus like ad ROAS targeting. Because nowadays we see that all of these DSPs targeting algorithms are highly sophisticated. So they already knew who they were going to target even before they bring them on board to the new games. So the gamers themselves coming from ad ROAS optimized campaigns will show high propensity for ad impressions. For those like coming from IAP driven campaigns will show high propensity for IAP purchases. So definitely we're in a unique position to do it well. Because Airflux runs on top of the Airbridge infrastructure, and giving us the access to high quality attribution and campaign data is certainly possible. But just to be clear, we actually haven't put this feature yet live. We're just testing it right now. And in the future, we hope so. We can release it to roll it out to the entire customer base. But to be clear, Airflux is an MMP agnostic product, and we actually aim to build this as a very independent solution. We actually want to build it in a way that it doesn't require Airbridge to operate.
Yeah, that's a good step, because back in the days when there was a AdROAS campaign on AdMob, on Google Ads, it required AdMob, but then Google quickly realized this is not a good way how to go forward, because no one used AdMob, and that limited the scale. And as soon as they opened up, it's just everything exploded in terms of the AdROAS campaigns on Google. So this is amazing.
Yeah.
And what's the kind of, you mentioned A/B testing, and you mentioned it quite a lot. So how does your A/B testing solution kind of differs from anything else?
Yeah, so I think many gaming studios, they use Firebase because not only just free, but it's most accessible, and people just use it a lot. There's a lot of case studies like well illustrated online about using Firebase to run the A/B testing. So how we differ from Firebase, I want to actually take that angle to answer the question. So with Firebase, the difference is that you manually define hypotheses. So for example, if you're a game, let's just say, I want to actually make our welcome package being shown right after they, clear the first stage. I want to test it out whether it is better for us to show that welcome package offer right after the onboarding or the tutorial, or maybe after completing the first stage. You want to test it out. And if you have this kind of hypotheses, you need to build a test group, run the experiment, and analyze the result. So that's like really great. And you always have to do it, of course, but it's only great for testing big ideas. But the problem of the solutions like Firebase is that it doesn't scale across millions of users of thousands of these variables. For example, you want to see how this A/B testing that I just mentioned works for the US customers only, US gamers only. If you want to test it with the Japanese customers, if you want to test it with French customers, you have to do it again and again and again. Because one A/B testing is isolated to itself. It doesn't really affect the other variants or other hypotheses. But the problem is most of these games are running in hundreds of these countries. And they actually have, if we only take into account Android and iOS, let's just say there are 100 countries, 200 tests that you need to do. So that is the reason why I believe Airflux can do better in terms of ad monetization experiments than Firebase, because we already have this kind of structured thinking into how would gaming companies do to A/B test that. So we try to build our tool to automate the entire loop, specifically for ad monetization, taking into account some of the common variables like country, OS, their engagement, playtime, ECP, and everything. And we predict, segment, test, learn, and optimize continuously over and over again. So I would say Firebase and the normal A/B testing tools is more like a toolbox for greater testing. I would say testing greater ideas, bigger ideas, where Airflux is kind of an engine that kind of runs on and on without you having to think too much on hypotheses or how you should split the control group and the treatment group.
What are the risks associated with giving Airflux complete control over your ad delivery?
I believe that was yeah, I didn't expect this question. I so I would say no serious risks. We usually, that is the reason why we would go with the A/B testing. We would statistically just do the valid A/B test. So no surprises. So performance never regresses because we do the A/B testing. So the only variation that we could expect is the uplift size. So some games might see just like 10% LTV uplift. The others would see 40% or more, and hopefully like 50% or beyond. And it depends on how optimized they were before, but it always moves in the right direction because reinforcement learning, how it works is if the A/B testing goes wrong, maybe let's just say, oh, there's minus uplift. There's not even an uplift. There's a decremental value in this test. And the reinforcement learning will come up with another variable for the ad timing and frequency, and just do it again until it reaches positive and until it goes beyond that. So there was an interesting case of one of these customers that they actually saw 8% uplift in 2 weeks. So they were happy, but they were a little bit disappointed. Oh, like 8%. Okay, fine. It's good, but maybe not as much as we thought. But after like 5 weeks, we saw 28% uplift. And after 3 months, actually they are our longest customer right now because this solution has been out in the market for just a few months. So they actually saw 54% uplift after 3 months. Reinforcement learning, the benefit of combining reinforcement learning and A/B testing is just that you just run the A/B testing on and on until you reach the optimal point.
One thing, I think there's a big difference here in a way that like regarding like how successful it is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Roy.
Mm-hmm.
Not only how much kind of better at eCPM this thing can squeeze in, but also how many LTV IAP payers it can save and not deter with the ads. So if I understand, this should not only increase the ad revenue, but also IAP revenue because it also helps the initial churn of payers. Therefore,
True.
if your game is more IAP based, you kind of prevent more payers churning, therefore IAP goes higher. If your game would be only more ad based, therefore the uplift should be higher. Do I get that right?
Yeah, Jakob, you're right. So that's actually a big part of what we aim to build for sure. And that's what we're doing already. I believe the behaviors of the purchasers and the non-purchasers should be totally different. So you just mentioned that when you look at the purchase conversion curve, and after 7 days, if you're seeing almost zero purchases, then you can assume that everyone else are just the free players. They should be exposed to the ads, of course. So we try to actually build the same kind of algorithm even before observing that curve. So we try to actually capture that purchase probability early on and see if this user has like 80% purchase probability. If we believe so, we shouldn't show them the ads. And if they're having a very low purchase probability based on our algorithm, we should start showing them ads, but just to the level where we don't want them to churn. So this is kind of a very abstract logic that we're building. And you're right that these three things, like ad monetization, interstitial rewarded videos, I think they're tightly related to the purchase behaviors of the users.
I'm also just thinking, right? So a lot of developers, they have defined points where they have interstitials in their game, right? So after a game, before a game, and that's usually brought together with a cooldown timer. So I'm assuming that Airflux then takes control of the cooldown timer, and that's what basically it uses to decide the ad frequency and ad delivery, right?
Yeah, we hope to build that specifically for the rewarded videos. So there's kind of two factors that we could control for rewarded videos: the cooldown time, as you mentioned, and the amount of the reward that we pay out to the users. So if the reward is too high or too low, then it becomes a problem. So maybe smartly balancing the reward that is given out to the users once they watch the rewarded videos could be one thing that we can control. And the other thing is definitely the cooldown time. And empirically, we know that if the cooldown time is longer, of course, it's going to be good for the eCPM. But at the same time, users want to, not going to stay in the game for like 2 hours, 3 hours just to wait for the cooldown time. So that's kind of the beauty of using data. So I think that's kind of course, the subject of A/B testing. And if you do it again and again with certain level of prediction as a baseline, we can certainly not only just help the interstitials get optimized, but also rewarded videos to a certain extent as well.
You were talking about the LTV uplift. Is it the LTV uplift on like day 1, day 3, day 7, day 30? Like, what's the actual time frame for this?
Yeah, it's really great question, because typically we see that even if LTV uplift is there, it's mostly skews towards the right, meaning that the early days retention difference, early days LTV difference makes a lot of huge difference at the end, because the LTV curve itself, even if there's a big difference, it all starts from day 1 to day 3, day 4, day 5, and then they kind of becomes pretty close to each other, treatment group and the control group.
Okay. I mean, it sounds actually like a very cool idea, or like the best idea since the sliced bread.
I mean, it's already proven by some studios, right? And this is just moving it to the masses, because this is hard to do. Yeah.
So, you mentioned casual games, but there's also these different use cases. Is it really genre agnostic as well, or like you really need to have a casual game to make the most out of it, or does it really?
So, in fact, I want to find it out as well, because we're definitely working with certain customers, and we've seen great success with all of the customers that we're working with. But I cannot be that confident to say that we are covering all the genres. So we typically work with those games, like casual and mid-core games with certain loop in it. Like it could be the stage, it could be the level. Where certain soccer games, it could be a match. But if the core loop of the game just goes on, and if we can use that as certain a unit of the user behavior, I think we can generally work well with these kind of games. But there are a lot of games that are just off the grid, some of the core this gameplay design that beyond my imagination. So I hope that we could work with most of these casual and mid-core games with the repetitive core loops in a core gameplay.
Yeah, I think that's like what Felix mentioned, that you need to have the placement before the level, after the level, somewhere, just to maximize the LTV uplift as well.
Yeah.
So 8%, 15%, 54%. I'm just a bit curious if you want to go into it. What's the pricing?
So we actually charge based on API calls. So we call this API Inference API. So the most minimum package that we would offer to the clients is 12 million annual inference calls, which is 1 million per month, and the amount is reasonable. And the reason why we would charge this way is because we realized that we thought of other different pricing models, and we're still exploring. To be fair, maybe I'll come up with the different pricing models, but we talked with a lot of gaming founders and realized that they need certain level of certainty. They want to control the pricing. So if the pricing just goes beyond, if it's RS model, sometimes it could be too big. So they're kind of afraid of that. So that is the reason why we said that something that is more measurable than the RS or other kind of pricing models could be just the API calls, because you know how much or how many API calls that you're making, you can control that. When we work with the gaming companies, we would recommend them using our tool first to the T1 or T2 countries, because those countries with lower eCPM, the incremental benefit of using this API should be diminished. So I want them to use us for more, I would say, higher eCPM countries, because it makes sense to them. It makes sense for us to, prove that we can generate incremental value to the customers. Yeah.
Just to clarify, inference call I should imagine as, let's say, the API giving the interstitial to a specific user because he has crossed the threshold or something.
Yeah, so it's more like before you trigger the ad from the mediation side, you can ask us whether we should show it to them right now or not. And then we kind of answer you yes or no. So that should be counted as one API call.
As a call. So could be multiple times per same user, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure. Okay.
How do you ensure that essentially, I know a couple mediation players. Some of them are more aggressive than others. How do you ensure that they're not angry?
Well, I haven't thought of it very deeply because I only thought of raising the LTV
Yeah.
for the
Yeah,
gamers.
well, I mean, that's part of the equation. Then there's the other part of the equation.
Truly. But I honestly believe that we're kind of taking a different approach. So let's just say that there's two types of ad monetization. One is on the US level, and the other one is on the eCPM level. So raising CPMs, like maybe using some of the tactics like bid floors or waterfall, optimization or anything like that is foundational. It improves the value of each impression. So it really helps you get a higher eCPM. And I definitely agree with that. It's foundational. But what we do is kind of different, that we try to optimize when and how often ad appears to really grow the number of ad impressions you can safely show without hurting retention. So while eCPM is more like a multiplier, ad timing increases the size of the pie. So it's more like a volume play. Just to take best of both worlds, I would say is optimal, and where the value kicks in and where the compound effect is. So that is the reason why we try not to go too much deep into the mediation side of things. Rather, we would just say we're more like a US optimization for the ad experience.
So look, Felix, I think if the developers are getting more money, then also the mediations and the ad networks are getting more.
I really hope
Not
so.
always.
Yeah.
Not always. Basically, let me translate here what Roy said, right? So basically, they're only optimizing ad delivery, which is very clever, because basically, if you start playing around with bid floors, that's when you start hurting networks' margins, right? Because you got to remember, 30% on the admon side is their take rate usually, right? And on the UA side, the margin probably is closer to 50 or 60%, right? So if the eCPM goes up because of a bid floor, that would technically hurt margins for a UA network, right? But basically what Roy said is we don't do that, because essentially then we could anger the gods on Mount Olympus. So they're only optimizing the ad delivery for that reason.
I mean, I also play a lot of mobile games, but sometimes, I would call myself in a fat thumb mode. I will not even watch the ads or just, swipe it. So to some degree, what we want to do eventually is really just try to maximize the conversion rate as well, because if you are, watching these ads too many times to the point where you want to drop off from the game, I don't think it's healthy for the advertiser. So it's kind of both, but we try to make a good balance between these two things. That's what we aim to build, ideally.
Say, like, to the point where you want to throw the mobile phone against the wall because it's too many ads. Yeah, but okay. I mean, so you are playing nicely with the mediations and
yeah, hope so.
Yeah. But then I think what's usually the KPI or the metrics or whatever that kind of helps studios to make the decision to actually, let's go. Let's install the SDK and let's start A/B testing and optimizing.
Yeah, the LTV uplift for sure.
Okay.
But not just the ad LTV, but total LTV uplift. And we usually see that it sits around 10 to 50%. And often the time that it's realized, it takes around 2 to 3 weeks. So in summary, like total LTV uplift, 10 to 50% within 2 to 3 weeks is our kind of punchline. And that's the number that really turns people's heads. These numbers always get people excited and interested. So that's kind of what we want to achieve for the partners. And we don't guarantee, but what we guarantee is a statistical significance. So when you look at the number, I would like you to definitely believe it. And I want to make this number reliable. So we're using a very trustable statistical, kind of tools to really verify and validate that we're delivering that uplift. And also time to value is important. I know how fast the landscape changes. Like every week, new creators just pouring into this market, new tactics. Everyone is like benchmarking each other very fiercely. So time is of an essence. So definitely we want to show you the results fast within 2 to 3 weeks. And I believe it's certainly possible because typically the first week, the results could be either surprising or sometimes it could be mediocre. like 5% uplift or 6% uplift or 8,
Oh, it's still pretty good. Come on.
Yeah. but like sometimes people think it isn't just enough. But in the second week, so what we found is another interesting is the reinforcement learning. The typical cadence of it is 1 week. So not that we set it as 1 week precisely. In order for certain tests in one segment to reach stat sig, we observed that it takes around like 6 to 7 days. So every week, the reinforcement learning will come out with a new policy, a new ad timing experiments or ad frequency experiments for interstitial, for example. And it just goes on and on. So after like 2 to 3 weeks, already 2 to 3 times of adjustments should have been made. And that leads to some, I would say, some good results, mostly.
I'm glad you say you can't guarantee anything, because as soon as someone says guaranteed uplift of 20 to 30%, that smells, man. It's very fishy.
Yeah, we're not doing ad mob refreshes, right?
Yeah. No, but look, so we know from Felix that he started working with you on this already with some of the gaming companies he works with. So that's enough for me. That's perfect.
Yeah.
Anything you wanna share? Yeah, I want to share with the audience and how they can reach out to you. Like when, what should they do? Obviously after the podcast.
We have our website, airflux.ai. We have the blog, and we're releasing case studies, more of them for sure. So please like reach out to us through our website. And like I'm easily, I'm an easy person. I'm on LinkedIn. I actually always press likes to 2NF Gamer postings and Mate posting, you guys postings all the time. You can reach out to me anytime. You can send me a friend request. I would love to just engage in a conversation. As a data guy, of course, like we're building SaaS, but I try to be skin in the game. I love talking with, game founders. I have a lot of friends in the gaming market. Like many of them stay up very late, talk with me about all these different stuff. So I definitely want to talk with you anytime. So reach out to me, please.
Awesome. We'll put all the links into the show notes and also tag you everywhere we can, because we love you for some time already. We know each other for some time. So thank you very much for coming, talking about Airflux. Jakub is already implementing the SDK.
Great to hear. Thanks.
Thank you. And then listeners, thank you very much for coming also. And I hope you enjoyed the episode. Please make any comments, ask questions if you want under the video or in our Slack channel. And we see you all there. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Ciao.